I'm Val. I was a teacher for 7 years, and I've helped thousands of teachers pass their certification exams at 240. And today, I'm going to help you. I'm going to prepare you for the TExES ESL Supplemental test. This video is going to cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts that will be on the test, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. Let's take off. Now, the ESL Supplemental is broken into 3 domains: language concepts and language acquisition, ESL instruction and assessment, and last, this one is a mouthful, foundations of ESL education, cultural awareness, and family and community involvement. Try saying that 5 times fast. Each domain has between 2 and 5 competencies nestled under it. The first domain we'll look at is ESL instruction and assessment. This is domain 2 of the ESL supplemental exam. But don't worry, we'll circle back to domain 1 here in a bit. We're starting with domain 2 because it's the biggest of the exam. It's made up of 5 competencies and counts for almost half of your score, so you really want to pay attention to these. Before we jump into the competencies, let's talk about the super important concept that comes up 6 times within domain 2 alone. I'm talking about ELPS. These are the English language proficiency standards used when teaching English language learners in TExES. They describe student expectations for listening, speaking, reading, and writing at the beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high levels. Now, this may seem like a lot of information, and it is, but we've taken these charts and broken them down into easily digestible takeaways, and you will find them in our study guide. Just FYI, in addition to this amazing video, we have online study guides that give you all the tools, flashcards, and authentic questions you need to guarantee you pass your test. We'll put the link in our description below so you can subscribe after you finish this video. On your exam, there are 2 main ways you'll be tested on the ELPS. You may need to identify the effective strategy to use based on the ELL's proficiency level. Or you may have to identify the student's proficiency level based on a work or conversational sample. Now, let's go over a key concept to know for each competency in domain 2. When we zoom in on descriptive statement C from competency 3, we see the term communicative competence. This means students learning English can form phrases and sentences, fix communication breakdowns, put together longer forms of communication, and respond appropriately based on their particular situation. Now, competency 4 is a natural step from this. It's all about promoting students' communicative language development. One effective way to do this is providing feedback to English language learners. This does not mean getting into the nitty-gritty of every error a student makes by explaining why it's wrong. That sounds exhausting. Effective feedback can be as simple as restating what the ELL says, minus the errors. For example, if an ELL says, "I put salts on my popcorn," the teacher could respond with, "Oh, you put salt on your popcorn? I do that too," and correct the error without directly pointing it out. Remember me talking about the ELPS? These come up a lot in Competency 5. This makes sense because Competency 5 is all about literacy development, and the ELPS cover reading and writing, along with listening and speaking, which are all interrelated to literacy. Within Domain 2, Competency 6 is all about promoting ESL students' content area learning. For example, think about teaching ELL science or social studies for this one. Now, before you can teach the content, you have to be aware of factors that may affect ELLs in this area. Potential issues include lack of prior learning experiences, lack of familiarity with specialized language and vocabulary, lack of familiarity with structure and uses of textbooks and other print resources, and varying English language proficiency and content area knowledge. We cover strategies to address each of these issues in our study guide. Let's go over one now. Make content comprehensible to English language learners through scaffolding techniques, such as activating and building background knowledge, pre-teaching key vocabulary terms, and using gestures and other visual cues throughout instruction. Competency 7 is the last of the second domain, and it's all about assessment, including the ESL program process in TExES. You may be wondering what assessment has to do with ESL program process. Well, for one, entering an ESL program starts with a test. Once it has been determined that a language other than English is spoken in a student's home, an assessment will be given before a meeting is held to determine the student's placement. All students who are placed in a bilingual or ESL program in Texas also participate in TELPAS, which stands for the Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. It evaluates the English language development of limited English proficiency learners. Now, let's dive into Domain 1. I have some great stuff to show you in this one. Domain 1 is called Language Concepts and Language Acquisition. It comprises competencies 1 and 2. Now, I'm going to go over some amazing, concrete concepts you should know. The two competencies are fundamental language concepts and L1 and L2 processes and interrelatedness. Basically, this domain is all about language and how people learn it. L1 stands for language 1, meaning someone's native language, while L2 stands for language 2, meaning a second language, which brings us back to the name of the exam, English as a Second Language, or ESL, which is not to be confused with ELPS, which, as we discussed, is one of the most important concepts you need to know on the test. Whew, that's a lot of witches. For competency 1, you'll need to know the building blocks of language, starting with phonetics, which is the study of the basic sounds of speech, and building all the way out to pragmatics, which is the practical use of language. You'll also need to be familiar with the theories about how people learn language, such as the stages of second language acquisition, BICS, and CALP, Krashen's 5 hypotheses, the natural approach, the CALLA approach, the nativist theory, the social interactionist theory, and total physical response, just to name a few. Now, you could spend time Googling what each of these terms mean, vetting the sources to find on the internet, and then writing down what you think are the key points about each of these terms. Or you could just get our study guide and be confident you are learning exactly what you need to know to pass the TExES ESL Supplemental test. But let's go ahead and talk about each of those theories in detail. BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills. CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. Language development professor Jen Cummins theorizes that it takes 1 to 3 years to reach proficiency in BICS, while it takes 5 to 7 years to develop CALP. BICS are more visible, like the tip of the iceberg. They are seen every day in routine interactions with family and friends. CALP is more under the surface. It is required for specialized situations like formal school settings. The iceberg becomes even more complex when CULP is factored in. CULP stands for Common Underlying Language Proficiency, and this dual iceberg indicates that L1 knowledge can support the acquisition of L2. We have a video all about this in our study guide. Now, let's get into Domain 3. You remember that one, the one with the long name? Yes, I'm talking about foundations of ESL education, cultural awareness, and family and community involvement. It's helpful to know that each part of this name translates to the 3 competencies covered in this domain. Let's talk about the foundational competency first. This one is all about the foundations of ESL education. It may surprise you to know that court cases come up on the ESL supplemental exam, but they do. Here are a couple of important ones to know. Lau versus Nichols is considered the cornerstone for providing equitable access to education for ELLs whose home language is something other than English. The children of concern were Chinese American students in the San Francisco Unified School District who were receiving instruction in English, which they could not understand. The court ruled that children needed scaffolding and other strategies to make the instructional input comprehensible. One more important case you should know for your exam is Castaneda versus Picard. This case set the criteria to ensure districts take action to meet the needs of ELLs, including implementing research-based resources and effective programs for them. Now, competencies 9 and 10 each have 2 key takeaways that will help you answer exam questions with confidence. Competency 9 is all about promoting an effective learning environment for students from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. Let's talk about the two main ideas that come up in questions from these competencies. First, students should be given the opportunity to share information about their culture with the class. Second, teachers should engage the class in lessons about cultural differences both proactively and when conflict arises due to students behaving in ways not considered to be the norm to their peers. And finally, Competency 10 covers family and community involvement. Here are some important things to consider that will help you when these questions pop up on your exam. Families from other countries have different educational experiences and may be unfamiliar with American school and all that it entails. Empower them with information and present it in a way that is comprehensible to them. It is not effective to share assessment data with parents if they are not sure what they are looking at. Make sure they understand what was assessed and what the results indicate. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts, let's look at some practice questions to show you how these concepts can appear on the test. If you want a lot of practice questions, you can click the free practice test below. At the end, you'll get a score report to show how well you did. Now for questions. Remember how Domain 1 includes understanding basic concepts of language? Let's look at how that is reflected in a question. A student who understands how to create a word by adding a prefix to another word has learned about. I thought the correct answer here was phonology, but it turns out that is not quite it. The correct answer here is actually morphology. Through the question feedback in the study guide, I can see that morphology refers to word formation. New words can be formed by adding an affix to the root. A prefix is an affix that can be added before the root, like adding re to do to form redo. Let's look at one more. This one is about the stages of second language acquisition. Hannah, an English learner from Germany, has been in the US for about 6 months and is in the early production stage of language acquisition. Which of the following instructional activities would be appropriate for her? Responding to yes, no, or either/or questions is an appropriate activity for students in the early production stage when they are still relying on listening and absorbing a lot of new information. Activities in the other choices are better suited for students in different stages of second language acquisition. Now, let's look at some questions from Domain 2. Remember, this is the biggest one. An ESL teacher likes to use sentence frames to help provide ELL students with vocabulary and structure that they may not be able to produce on their own. This is an example of which of the following types of linguistic accommodation. The correct answer is scaffolded. With scaffolded accommodations, ELLs receive structured support that enhances the learning of language and content. Sentence frames are just one example of instructional scaffolding. Let's try another. This one is about the Alps. Yes, the Alps again. When responding to a prompt about Western expansion in an 8th grade history class, an English learner writes the following. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase made the U.S. twice more big than before. The American people was interested in new land. Everyone want land to farm, you know. So many people moved west. The student's writing style is characteristic of a student in which of the following levels of writing proficiency? Beginning, intermediate, advanced, or advanced high. The work sample indicates that the student is performing at the intermediate level of English language writing proficiency. It is usual for an ELL at this level to write loosely connected text, which has an oral tone. The student makes some errors with comparatives, noun-verb agreement, and adjectives. These errors are all common for the intermediate level. Let's see one more example from Domain 2. Mrs. Henderson is a dual language teacher at her school and a member of the school's Language Proficiency Assessment Committee. She has reviewed the assessment results of recently enrolled students who indicated English as a second language on their enrollment documentation. She meets with the LPAC campus administrator and other committee members to. Choice D is the best answer. The LPAC's recommendation must be accompanied with a parental endorsement to take effect. After deciding the best instructional approach for the student, The LPAC sends written notification to the parent for review and asks questions if needed. If the parent agrees with the accommodations, he or she will accept the recommendation. All right, let's see a couple of questions from Domain 3. A school district is planning to introduce a new ESL program, and it is debating between a sheltered English immersion program or a structured English immersion program. Which is true about structured English immersion, but not sheltered English immersion? The structured programs don't provide explicit ESL instruction, while sheltered programs do. Sheltered programs have language objectives to accompany each content objective in lessons. The other choices are true about both structured and sheltered programs. Let's throw you one more. Last year, a high school hired a new programming director who introduced many different programs to students, both before and after school hours. At the end of the year, the teachers at the school noted that their ELL students seemed to have higher self-esteem than in past years. Which of the following programs might have caused this effect? A school baseball league, in which students competed against their classmates in a series of friendly games during lunch. B, a peer tutoring program, where struggling students are matched with peers who excel in specific subject areas for homework help. C, a series of multicultural events that introduce students to different cultures and backgrounds through food, music, and games. Or D, a career fair, in which students were introduced to different companies and jobs in their town. Choice C is best, because multicultural events create a welcoming environment in which students feel like diversity is accepted. An environment that is so culturally inclusive, it's likely to increase students' self-esteem. All of the other events may increase self-esteem for certain English language learners, like ones that are good at baseball, but they are not as strong of a choice for the school's ELA population as a whole. Now, that is just a small sampling of practice questions to give you an idea of how these concepts are assessed on the test. There's still plenty more to learn. Did you know that thousands of teachers have passed their certification test by using 240 study guides? If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the TExES ESL Supplemental exam, then take the next step and subscribe to the 240 study guide. It has hours of videos so you can watch and or listen while doing chores. It is test-aligned with hundreds of practice questions so you know precisely what you need to study. And it comes with a money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now to get started.